morning.
Did I do that?
No, I was just going to entangle it so I could walk over here. I brought along some artifacts here today that belong to my great aunt. And so I have her songbook and her diploma, her certificate as well. And her name was Imogene Martin. And I'll be talking about her a little bit later. When I first got interested in this topic, I know I've talked before about my Aunt Ruth, my dad's sister, who is still living, and I visited her about 10 years ago. And she was telling me about her mother, my grandmother, and how she almost became a victim of the Spanish flu. And had that occurred, my dad was born in 1922, so I would not be here to talk to you about this. And I was having problems, finding people that had died from it, because when you look on Ancestry, not, at that year, 1918, you don't always find that death certificate that tells how they died. But in our library upstairs, in the Genie Library, I found quite a few things. They listed names, said that they died from the Spanish flu, and so I was kind of able to take it from there. So the Spanish, or I should ask before I get started, raise your hand if you have a family member that had died from the Spanish flu. Okay, so not too many of us, and I think I do have yours included. Yep. The Spanish flu spread swiftly around the world, aided particularly by the movement of troops. Within a little over a year, it had infected up to 500 million individuals, a third of the world population, and killed up to 100 million of them. In the U.S., somewhere between 600,000 and 675,000 people died. Now, I could go back and tell you accounts that, somebody else said it was this number, somebody else said it was this number, but for right now, I'm just going to stick with that, and it's kind of an overwhelming number of people that died as you see it. And of course, Jackson County suffered its loss of many, many individuals. The photo of a group of students at Oak Park School in Des Moines, taken in 1918, and a handwritten note read, "Kindergarten knitter during the war." While Americans of all ages rallied around the American doughboys fighting in the trenches of France, a different war of swords was underway that year on the home front. And this quoted photo appeared in the Des Moines Register April 7, 2020. Clara Tritz was born in St. Donatus, daughter of John and Magdalene Kirpus Tritz. She married John Peter Kemp in 1912. She died as a result of the 1918 Spanish flu, 6 days apart from her husband, who died first. Photo on far left shows Clara with her parents and brother, and the photo on the right may be from their wedding. And I don't believe they had any children. I couldn't find where they did. Dominic Sweeney was born in Swingle, and his wife Mary in Jackson County. He died December 18th, and she died the next day. They had 4 children, with the oldest being 5 years old at the time the parents died. The youngest child died the following year, at a year old, at the home of her grandparents in Bernard. It is believed that she also died from the flu that killed her parents. So Dominic Sweeney is shown there holding daughter Doris in the photo that was taken in 1918. So just a really nice family, and they were just torn apart by this epidemic. Daughter Helen is standing, and then Mary is seated holding an infant. So not all of the children, I guess, are in that photo that you can see. Does anybody know, is the Sweeney family, are they still around? Imogene and Zach Marvin, siblings from Spragueville, were victims of the flu. And so they were my great aunt and uncle. Imogene, shown in the left photo on the far right, and then in this photo, she's on the left. She had 3 older brothers. Imogene, a teacher, took care of her brother Zach, who had become ill. My grandmother, who was her sister-in-law, was going to take care of Zach, but found out that she was expecting. And so instead, Zach's sister took care of her. Because there's one thing about the Spanish flu is it particularly targeted pregnant women. And so had my grandmother, as I said before, taken care of Zach, my father was born in 1922. So Zach Marvin was a carpenter, and he may have lived with his parents. And I think I mentioned that Imogene was a teacher. Clifford Wesley Hitchcock, age 4, died of influenza on October 24th. His sister Bessie, age 15 days, died a month later on November 8th. She was the youngest child and only daughter of James and Ida Welch Chase. The Hitchcock siblings are buried in Hazen Cemetery. And then in 1919, a 3rd child, Charles, died at the age of 2, and that was from meningitis. Some researchers believe the flu outbreak started at an army base in Kansas and was carried to Western Europe by U.S. troops. It was dubbed the Spanish flu after Spain's King Alfonso XIII contracted it. Others say the disease took its name from Spain, where it was generally believed to have first appeared. From Spain, it spread all over Europe, gaining virulence as it spread from country to country. Some accounts say that the disease first reached the United States on the 12th of September, 1918, with the arrival of the Norwegian liner, the Bergensfjord, I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, which had 200 cases of the influenza during its voyage to the United States. The disease spread quickly and within a few weeks had reached epidemic proportions. Army cantonments were hit especially hard. The particular danger from the disease was that it would turn into pneumonia, which was very often fatal. Remedy prescribed was bed rest, good food, plenty of water, and sleeping in a well-ventilated room. By October, the disease had reached nearly all parts of the United States, and the Surgeon General issued a series of precautions to be observed. The medical profession had no serum, vaccine, or antitoxin available that would combat the disease. Philadelphia became the city with the highest death toll in the United States. And a lot of the photos that you'll see today are from the Library of Congress, as this one is. And I believe this is your relative. Born in Maquoketa, Frederick von Schrader died in Great Lakes, Illinois, while serving in the U.S. Navy. He was the son of Charles Ulrich von Schrader and Mary Imogene Mitchell. His father died the following year. Do you know what his father died from, by chance? Okay. Because it was still going on a little bit, in 1919.
It was Mary Joyner's brother. Mary Joyner was his sister.
Mary Joyner was Frederick's sister. George Arthur Potter was born in Jackson County and is buried in the First Presbyterian Church, Bellevue. He died of the flu while serving in the Navy, seaman, 2nd class. He had a weeks-long furlough at fair time and was home enjoying a visit with his family and friends. He returned to his training camp for duty and was getting ready to go across the sea when he was stricken, dying at the Naval Hospital in Great Lakes, Illinois. He designated his little sister as his beneficiary, as written in his obituary in the Maquoketa Excelsior. When influenza began to cut its deadly path across the United States in the autumn of 1918, it did so with such speed and fatal efficiency that some believed sinister forces to be at work. On September 17, 1918, Lieutenant Colonel Philip Jones, head of the Health and Sanitation Section of the Emergency Fleet Corporation voiced his opinion that the epidemic might have been started by the Germans, put ashore from U-boats. Others theorized that the practices at Fort Riley, Kansas, which housed 26,000 men, was the origin of the start of the epidemic. Within the camp were thousands of horses and mules that produced 9 tons of manure each month. To dispose of this manure, burning was the accepted method. On March 9th, a threatening black sky forecast the coming of a significant dust storm. The dust, combining with the ash of burning manure, kicked up a stinging, stinking yellow haze. The sun was said to have gone dead black in Kansas that day. Soon the camp had over 100 sick men, all suffering from the same thing. In April and May, over 500 prisoners at San Quentin came down with the same illness. In March, 84,000 Americans set out for Europe to engage in the fight against Germany, and the following month with another 118,000 shipping out. Little did they know they were carrying with them a deadly virus. By early summer, the flu extended its reach beyond the U.S. and Western Europe. Numerous cases of influenza were reported in Russia, North Africa, and India. The Pacific Ocean provided no protection as influenza spread to parts of China, Japan, the Philippines, and down to New Zealand. By July, the influenza had left its mark globally. Tens of thousands had fallen ill and died. The first wave was a prelude to the perilous path the flu would cut when it reappeared in full force in the fall. Clement James Shanahan was born July 28, 1895, in South Gary, Owen, son of Thomas and Susan Kennedy Shanahan. He had 7 siblings. He died on September 18th at the age of 23 at Great Lakes, Illinois. He is buried in St. Aloysius Cemetery, South Gary, Owen. Shanahan served with Company 12, 15th Regiment. His obituary was published in the Cascade Pioneer. Clement Shanahan of South Gary, Owen is the first victim of Spanish flu in this vicinity. The death of the young man occurring at the hospital, the Great Lake Naval Training Station. And is that where we said your relative had died also? He was stricken with the fatal disease just 4 days ago, and following this, the pneumonia developed. His parents, Mr. and Mrs. Thomas Shanahan, were summoned to Chicago and were with him when he died. The young man was 22 years old and worked on his father's farm until his enlistment in the Navy 6 months ago. Besides his grief-stricken parents, he was survived by 3 sisters and 2 brothers. The honorary bodyguard was composed of 30 members of the Cascade Council Knights of Columbus. And Private Joseph P. Kennedy is buried in St. Patrick's, Gary, Owen. George Henry Schwab, the son of George and Mary Culp Schwab, was born in Bellevue. He was serving in France when he died of pneumonia. And then it said possibly the Spanish flu, but most likely. To everyone in the city, he was known as Bud, and the news of his death brought tears to many eyes. He was 28 years old, and before he entered the Army, was a rural carrier out of Bellevue. I assume the people from Bellevue here? Are the people here from Bellevue today? Okay. Karen, okay. And do you know the family? I mean, it was Schwab's?
I knew some shops. I don't know if there was.
Schwab? I'm saying it wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, there was a shop that ran a fuel station over there for years.
Yeah.
Fred,
Most
Fred
likely.
and George, his name was George as well, so perhaps he was named after him, I don't know.
He was one of the first of the drafted boys to leave here, and after being transferred to Camp Dodge and then to Camp Pike, he was promoted to corporal and made orderly to the colonel of his regiment. He left for France in September of 1918 and attended an officer's school there. His father and 1 sister, Miss Stella at home, and 2 brothers, Fred at Camp Gordon and Wilbur at Camp Dodge, survived him. And I don't know then if I'm not sure the outcome of those 2 men then, if they ended up getting the flu as well. Victor Vaughn was no stranger to death and disease. Serving as a doctor during the Spanish-American War, Vaughn had witnessed the devastating effect of typhoid on young soldiers. In September, Vaughn, a former president of the American Medical Association, received urgent orders to proceed directly to Camp Devens outside of Boston. What Vaughn witnessed at the military changed his life forever and compelled him to question his very faith in medical science. The saddest part of my life, he admitted, was when I witnessed the hundreds of deaths of the soldiers in the Army camps and did not know what to do. Vaughn applied all he had to trying to understand and conquer the silent killer that was taking the lives of the men around him. Vaughn uncovered the unnerving fact that while most influenza viruses prey on the old or the very young, this strain took aim at those in the prime of life. This infection, Vaughn wrote, like war, kills the young, vigorous, robust adults. The husky male either made a speedy recovery and rather abrupt recovery, or was likely to die. If the epidemic continues its mathematical rate of acceleration, civilization could easily disappear from the face of the earth. Then, to Vaughn's relief, the influenza seemed to slip away as mysteriously as it had arrived. Vaughn pointed out that the doctors of the day knew no more about the flu than 14th century Florentines had known about the Black Death. Harvey Alton McPeak died of pneumonia in France. Born in Maquoketa to Albert McPeak and Olive Ann Wood, he had 6 siblings, 1 sister and 5 brothers. He is buried with his wife, who had died 2 years earlier, and his 1-month-old son had died in 1913. They are buried in Elmwood Cemetery in Humboldt County, Iowa. He was married to Nellie Louise Palmer in 1909. From a newspaper account, McPeak was a noted Iowa athlete. He went to France last summer as a member of the Minnesota Artillery Force. Some little time ago, he was given a French cross for the brave deeds performed 2 months before. During a bombardment 2 months ago, Harvey and 5 other mates sought refuge in a dugout, but were buried by the explosion of a German shell. McPeak succeeded in freeing himself with a pick and shovel, and he was busily engaged rescuing his companions when 5 Germans attacked him. He converted his tools into weapons of war and killed 3 of the Huns, while the other 2 fled for safety. It was probably at this time McPeak was wounded, as previously reported. Alan J. Woods was born in Maquoketa, the son of Benjamin and Margaret Ann Adair Woods, who were from Indiana. Alan served in the Navy and died of pneumonia, and again he died at Great Lakes Training Center. He was a half-brother to Olive Ann Wood McPeak, who lost her son, mentioned in the previous slide. Alan is buried in the Esgate Cemetery. The Jackson Sentinel, October 29, 1918, Raleigh Kendall's obituary. The remains of Raleigh Kendall, who passed away at Fort Oglethorpe, Georgia, arrived here Monday evening accompanied by the father, Albert Washington Kendall, and sister, Mrs. Ben Jacobson, who were called late last week to the Southern camp by a message stating the son and brother's condition, but who, on account of delayed trains, they arrived there too late to see Raleigh alive. The funeral will be private and held at the home on West Platte Street, Wednesday morning at 10 o'clock. Raleigh Richard Kendall served in Company A, 211th Engineers, World War I. So we mentioned that, he was the brother of Mrs. Ben Jacobson. And then Raleigh was also the brother of longtime businesswoman Olive Kendall. She was just 13 when her brother had died. Prior to the war, Raleigh was a farmhand. Boys wore bags of camphor around their necks around the time of 1918-19. This was an old wives' method of flu prevention, according to a December 1946 issue of Life magazine. The Spanish flu caused a variety of symptoms, including fever, headache, body aches, and difficulty breathing. It was a deadly strain of flu that attacked healthy adults, especially pregnant women. There are some theories that younger adults, those in their 20s and 30s, died at a higher rate during the pandemic because they hadn't been exposed to that version of the flu virus before. This meant they didn't have the immunity to that particular virus. Mortality was high in people younger than 5 years old, 20 to 40 years old, and 65 years and older. The high mortality in healthy people, including those in the 20 to 40-year-old age group, was a unique feature of the pandemic. Myrtle Emily McChesney was born in Andrew. Daughter of Andrew Jenkins McChesney and Olive Anna Briscoe, she had 12 siblings. She married Thomas Ezra Rowe in 1917 and died the following year in Missouri. Emma Rachel Simmons, photos shown with her and her sister, and I'm not sure which is which. She was born in Bellevue, the daughter of Warren and Louise Ada Adelaide Butler Simmons. Emma was the wife of Jeremiah T. Wilkerson, mother to Esther, Charles, Ada Jane, Fanny, Herbert, Mary Alice, Richard, Sidney Ann, Jeremiah, and Violet Wilkerson. Only one of her children was an adult at the time of her death. Mrs. Wilkerson died in Montana 3 days after her newborn daughter Violet was born. Violet died as an infant, most likely from the flu. It hit Iowa in late September 1918 and spread quickly through the schools, workplaces, and military camps, infecting over 93,000 and killing more than 6,000. The flu stories became big news. Postal workers wore masks to handle mail. Dances and athletic events were canceled. Movie theaters, schools, and churches were shuttered or had limited hours. Dick Hodges, a farmer residing near Emmeline, died in December after a brief illness of influenza. He married Beulah Ethel Clary in 1909. Besides his wife and mother, he was survived by his little girls, Mildred and Glatha. Photo taken in South Dakota where Dick was residing in 1909. Son Donald, who was born in May after the death of his father, served in World War II and is buried at Rock Island Arsenal. So I found that to be the case with a number of them. Somehow the pregnant women had avoided getting the flu, but then they, had the baby after their husband had died. And then lots of times they lost the baby then. So maybe they had the flu, I don't know. Frank Rader, whose home was about 3 miles east of Andrew, passed away after a few days' illness with influenza. And I had talked with the family, and they did say he had pneumonia, so they didn't necessarily know that he had the flu, but most likely he did. He was born, I saw some accounts say he was born in Springbrook and some say Andrew, so I'm not sure which. The son of...
3 miles is right in the middle. That's where we live.
Okay, so... Son of Peter and Katharina Gosch Rader, Frank was a farmer and the husband of Mary Ann Wagner, whom he married in 1907. Named Amy, her relatives told her of what a lovely woman she was and how much the family adored her. She passed away in 1982, and sadly 4 of her sons preceded her in death. Frank and Margaret were the parents of Orville, Harry, Clarence, Kenneth, and Floyd. The ages of their sons were 1, 4, 6, 8, and 10 at the time that Frank had died. His widow later married Theodore Moots, and they were the parents of Norbert and Carlos. So Margaret's father and her in-laws had already passed away before her husband died. So, I'm just wondering for help with, taking care of the children. And then 2 years later, in 1920, Margaret's brother died. And then I noticed that Margaret's brother's wife's maiden name was Moots, and when Margaret remarried, she remarried a Moots. And the name is the same with both, but I can't confirm that that was her sister-in-law's brother, that she married. And you, Nancy, you probably know the family, the Rader family.
You mean from Andrew?
Yeah, well, and I don't know
Well, see,
that.
there's the Raiders in Andrew and the Raiders in Bellevue. They aren't closely related, I don't think.
They are not, okay.
But when you mentioned Wagner, the Wagner farm is 3 miles east of Andrew and up the hill.
It is.
Yeah.
So shown is a childhood photo of Frank. And Frank Rader, then, he was a successful business farmer. And he was a breeder of white Plymouth Rocks and Emden geese. And John Rader, the Case IH implement dealer in Dubuque, is the grandson of Harry. So Harry was 8 when his father had died. So this is John's great-great-grandfather in this photo. So John provided me with this photo of the envelope that belonged to his great-grandfather. Then John's cousins, Scott and Nick Rader of Rader Brothers in Bellevue, are the grandchildren of Floyd. And Floyd was the youngest child of Frank Rader. He was born in 1917, and so he would not have had any memory, of his father having been, either less than a year or a year and a half old. The 1918 MHS graduate's life was cut short by this terrible epidemic. Lynn, the second son of Mr. and Mrs. Clarence V. Burleson, was born October 3rd, 1894, near Maquoketa, and after a short illness, passed away at the home of his wife's parents on West Pleasant Street on December 14th, aged 24 years. And there are a number in this presentation where people died and they were living on West Pleasant Street, and I just wonder if there was a connection there. There was some get-together, or why there were so many that died on West Pleasant Street. Lynn Littell Burleson was a young, ambitious man who farmed with his father and had built up a fine stock of cattle. He was united in marriage to Miss Charlotte Cundall of Maquoketa on January 26, 1916, and this union was blessed with son William. He was also survived by 2 brothers, Hunter and Burton, 2 grandfathers and 1 grandmother, and the funeral services were held at the home of Mr. and Mrs. Will Cundall, which were his in-laws. His wife was then just 19 when she was widowed. She gave birth to their second child on May 9th. And then 3 months later, that infant child died. In 1923, Charlotte married Fred Myatt, and to this union, son Glenn Casson Myatt was born. Arthur Schletch died on December 31st, 1918. He was born in Bellevue. His parents, Charles and Louisa Hartdixon Schletch, were living in Lamont at the time of his death. In 1921, his parents suffered the loss of 2 more sons, William, age 14, and Arnold, age 16. Arthur is buried in the St. John's Lutheran Cemetery, St. Donatus. The U of I Student Army Training Corps Battalion, pictured here in front of the old armory, were particularly susceptible. At the University of Iowa, 38 staff and students died from the flu or from pneumonia brought on by it. It is believed that the strict measures taken to control the disease helped contain the spread of the flu at the university. The campus was under strict military police security. Floyd Wesley Miller was the only son of Walter and Carrie Miller. He was a 1918 graduate of MHS. Myrtle, his sister, is shown holding him. Floyd spent his summer with his parents on the farm, and after registration day, September 12th, he planned to take the government training at Ames, given to the 18-year-old class of registrants. On October 1st, he became a soldier boy in preparation to help defend his country. He had only been in school a few days before he was stricken. When word came that he was seriously ill, his father drove to Ames at once, but by the time he arrived, his son had passed away. The father and an army attendant accompanied the body home. An open-air funeral service was held at the home of the parents 5 miles west of Maquoketa. Songs were by the Maquoketa High School Quartet. Burial was in Buckhorn Cemetery. Dr. F.V. Johnson wrote, "In the city of Maquoketa, every businessman is doing his utmost to obey the law regulating the control of the present epidemic of influenza. People are not permitted to loiter nor visit in the stores." He closes promptly at 6 and reports suspected cases to the health officers. Physicians are placarding homes affected. which so far have been few, and every citizen seems imbued with the idea of stamping the disease out as speedily as possible. Do we have any of those artifacts in the museum? Any
I don't
backcards?
think so.
Okay.
So that's the same as a quarantine sign, right?
I found this example
Okay.
here, but there were many examples. So I think it was to say, yes, this house, do not enter. However, and this is going on from the letter that I was just reading on the last slide. However, Maquoketa seems to be making a lone fight. What are the township trustees doing to combat the scourge? Are they legally organized as a board of health with an appointed township physician demanding that cases be reported and placarded? Are they enforcing the laws relative to private funerals, to suppression of social gatherings, to the prohibition of all public gatherings? Let every citizen in the state of Iowa live up to the regulations printed in another column and help stamp out this epidemic. Dr. Franz Victor Johnson was a physician in Maquoketa for 40 years. His parents had immigrated here in 1865 from Sweden. And this cardboard sign was courtesy of the Virginia Museum of History and Culture. And it just says, you can't enter without written permission from the Board of Health. You cannot enter that building or a house. Gladys Winifred DeGeer, age 21, died the day after her son Orion was born. Baby Orion lived for just 3 weeks. Gladys's husband remarried in 1920, and he and his wife Elvina had 6 children. They named their firstborn Orion after his father and deceased brother. Agnes Elizabeth Dempey-Wolf was born in Bellevue, daughter of Charles and Regina Evelyn Dempey-Wolf. Her occupation was listed as a servant in the home industry. She was just 26 years old and is buried in St. Joseph Catholic, Bellevue. She had 11 brothers and sisters. I had read in the library upstairs that the Ernst family, living in Mill Creek Valley, had lost 3 members of the family to the Spanish flu. But I couldn't locate names other than Anton Johann Ernst, who died in February of 1918. Prussian-born Anton immigrated to the United States, settling in Jackson County in 1852. 10 years later, he was married and they were blessed with 8 children. Anton was a farmer who served as a school director and was a road supervisor from 1875 to 1879. Mary Bach Jepson's obituary. The prevalent plague has called another one of our young people, and sorrow has entered another of our homes. At Davenport occurred the death of Mrs. Mary Bach Jepson, the daughter of Robert Bach. Mrs. Jepson was visiting in Davenport when taken ill a few days ago. Deceased about 20 years of age, was last May united in marriage to Jurgen Jepson, who is now en route to the firing line in France. She had a host of friends in the city and vicinity who deeply mourned her untimely death, and she's buried at Sacred Heart in Maquoketa. Henry George Keeter was just 26 years old. His widow was left to care for their 3 children, 2 girls and a boy, ages 6, 2, and less than 1 year. Keeter is buried in St. Joseph Catholic Cemetery in Bellevue. Charles William Norpel was born in 1891. He was the son of Ludwig and Joanna Fritz Meyer Norpel. Charles is buried in St. Joseph Catholic Cemetery. Pictured are Charles and his wife, Laura Ann Meyer. They are the parents of Norbert Charles and Richard John. Did some of you know the Norpels from Bellevue?
Yeah.
The first person in Bellevue area to become a victim of the disease was Christina Yeager Reichqueen. Christina was born in 1877 and the mother of 5 children, and at the time of her death, those ages were 16, 15, 12, 9, and 3. Joseph Sokol obituary. The little 1-year-old son of Mr. and Mrs. Arch Sokol passed away at the home, and again, this was on West Platte Street, after an illness of several days with pneumonia. The little one had been in delicate health for some time. The sympathy of an entire community goes out to the bereaved parents in their sorrow. The funeral was held from the home Monday afternoon, and this baby is buried in Mount Hope. The flu spread quickly through Camp Dodge, a World War I training camp near Des Moines. In one 12-hour period, 996 new cases occurred at the camp. A soldier rests in bed during the influenza epidemic that struck Camp Dodge. Within a week, 6,000 soldiers were ill, and the camp hospital was overwhelmed. The Army later put the death toll at 702, according to the Camp Dodge Gold Star Museum. The flu hit the camp on October 1st. More than 300 soldiers were under observation, records show. A newspaper account 4 days later said the number of sick had soared to 1,500. 4 deaths were recorded. The epidemic was raging in a camp a week after the first case. More than 6,000 soldiers were ill. The crush overwhelmed the camp hospital. Barracks were converted into temporary wards. Some 100 medical officers and 370 nurses struggled day and night. A camp document said many soldiers who awoke healthy were sick by noon and dead before supper. I just found that unbelievable. The stunning speed of death left the camp reeling. Medics worked frantically. Bodies were hauled to trucks, which were driven to ice-filled boxcars near the camp. The dead were stacked in the boxcars and moved to Des Moines for embalming. Hundreds of telegrams from worried relatives flooded the camp. Officials said the situation was under control, but in reality it was gaining momentum. Gordon, the camp museum's director, estimates the total toll at the base was more than 1,000. A postcard from the era shows a ward of the hospital at Camp Dodge during the epidemic. Merle Gall delivered fresh milk to the flu-plagued Camp Dodge in 1918. The memory hurt more than 80 years later. Gall, then a teen, unloaded the milk cans from his father's Model T and returned home. The grim parade at the camp went on for days. They threw them in the trucks like fence posts. They were driven down to the boxcars and sent to Des Moines. Theodore Willis, a ward surgeon at the base hospital, said the disease was impossible to stop or treat. Willis wrote, "One of my visions was of the great stack of plain pine coffins that appeared at the morgue every morning to be filled and hauled away during the night. I do not know where they went, perhaps to the occupant's hometown, not to be opened, or to a military cemetery at the parents' behest." The sad news was received of the death of Private Arnold Albert Brown at Camp Dodge. And he had gotten the flu, which was followed by pneumonia, and he died after a 10-day illness. His parents, Mr. and Mrs. J.F. Brown, were with him when he died. His parents were from Washington Township, Bellevue. Brown had joined the Army with the September contingent and had been assigned to the 49th Company. He would have turned 22 the following week. Besides his parents, he is survived by 3 brothers, one of whom was in France, and 4 sisters. The catastrophe rates only a footnote in state history. What happened in the warm October of 1918 has remained mostly a mystery. The Army refused public comment at the time and quarantined the camp. Daily reports stopped immediately. The story slipped from the newspapers and from conversation. Camp Dodge's horror is largely lost. No monuments, no plaques in public places to mark the state's worst disaster. The scourge lives only in the obscure spots. War documents packed in national and state archives, diaries and memories of the few who have followed the camp's history. Daily flu reports to the press were stopped in mid-crisis. Families alarmed by what they had heard asked for details. Many went to the base and learned their sons or husbands or brothers were dead. The camp surgeon announced in mid-October that the disease was subsiding, but actually the epidemic's full force was striking. So some information about this soldier. It wasn't from this area, but I still wanted to share. So this was a letter written home from Camp Dodge. Camp Dodge, August 13th, 1918. Letter written home from a Camp Dodge soldier. Dear Bro, I am well, only hungry. The rations are not anything extra. I am not settled yet for any length of time. I was moved again Monday morning, 3 blocks north from where I was. And I wonder if that's because they were turning his barracks then into a ward. But still detached from any company. We sure had a dust storm Monday, just as bad as in Kansas. I did not drill any yesterday. It was hot and dry here too. I am sorry to share that it is so hot and dry there, but don't worry. This is wartime. Make yourself cheerful. Jacob Albert Meyer died of pneumonia October 12th at the age of 22. He had 3 brothers and 1 sister, and one letter written to him from his mother. She said she couldn't get his 11-year-old brother to write him a letter. But then the mother mentioned, he had his school books. And then, of course, not to mention he had the cows to milk every night. So Jacob Meyer was born in Kansas. Henry Lutt of Baldwin received official word that his son Emil was in the service. Had passed away from an attack of pneumonia on October 19th. A month later, they received a letter that was dated November 18th from Emil. So much to their joy, who had mourned their son as having passed away. And in 1924, Emil married Laura Pearl Wicker, and no children were noted in their obituaries. Did anybody know Emil? Jackson Sentinel, the Grim Reaper, takes another of our boys. Charles Burnett, son of Albert and Mary Burnett, was born in 1890. And when 2 years of age, his parents moved to Hurstville. He made an effort to enlist some months before, but for physical reasons, he was not accepted. So in the fall, he was drafted into the United States Special and Limited Service on October 2nd, with several others, and he went to Jefferson Barracks, Missouri. After a short time, because of his physical disabilities, he was discharged, and he came home a very sick man on October 16th. His condition continued to get worse, and he passed away 5 days later at the home of his parents of the dread disease at the age of 27 years. He was a member of the Modern Woodmen for a number of years. He had 4 brothers, and it mentions here the one, John, he was overseas, it said to do his part. Because of the influence of quarantine, a short funeral service for the family was held at the home of the parents, just north of Hurstville Schoolhouse. And a number of close friends of the family came to the cemetery at Mount Hope to see the young man's body laid to rest. Mila Prusi, a Sebula woman who was a teacher, wrote Iowa Governor William Harding. She said a reliable source told her that the death rate in numerous camps from influenza is simply appalling. Yet even though they haven't adequate accommodations nor sufficient nurses, said Mila Prusi, they are still calling for more men. I think it's an honor as well as a duty to respond to the call of one's country, but it does seem such a pity to sacrifice our noble young men this way. She wrote, the governor assured Prusi that worry was unnecessary. I beg to advise, he said, that the reports you bring to my attention were exaggeration, and that the conditions in all the camps are now such as to give no cause for complaint or alarm. Harding wrote, October 31st, 1918, in that month, 620 people died at Camp Dodge. The Army's demands for silence failed to discourage rumors. Many relatives were infuriated by the horrible condition of the bodies shipped from the camp. An Army investigation found many botched situations. Investigators concluded the epidemic inundated the camp. Death records were in disarray. Several bodies were sent without proper preparation. Many were stunned by the treatment at the camp. They simply wrapped him in the sheet that he died in and tied ropes around the body and took him to the undertaker in Des Moines, wrote one relative. Another person reported when the body reached Cedar Rapids 4 days later, it was in an awful plight. The body had swollen until it crowded off the lid of the casket. The relative wrote, such acts of gross negligence towards our soldiers after they have made the last sacrifice for their country certainly seems uncalled for. Dr. Edward A. Gibbons, who resided in Bellevue, was about 42 years old when he contracted the flu. He was the husband of Mina Waychalk and the father of Ralph, Cecil, and Marie. His widow, I do not believe, remarried. Daily Iowan, October 10, 1918. Epidemic cases on the decline, authorities state. Nasal sprays and atomizers regarded as harmful by physicians. People should avoid getting feet wet. Red Cross filling large rush order of sterilized gauze masks. In the meantime, all public funerals were banned. When the federal government okayed a statewide quarantine, all public gatherings were ordered halted. Des Moines, Iowa, October 17th. To the mayor's health officers and local boards of health, you are directed and hereby ordered this day to have all public gatherings of every kind in the community forbidden. This order is imperative and must be executed at once. Guilford H. Sumner, MD. And then in October 22nd, the Jackson Sentinel. We, the mayor and city council of the city of Maquoketa, organized as a board of health in accordance with the above order to prevent further spread of the Spanish flu in our city and stamp out the disease as speedily as possible. Hereby make and issue the following order. All schools, theaters, churches, libraries, picture shows, dance halls, lodges, billiard and pool rooms, card rooms, smoking and lounging rooms, where people congregate must be at once closed and remain closed, and all public funerals dispensed until further orders of this board. All social gatherings, either at public places or private homes, must cease until further orders. All stores, barbershops, and places where commodities are sold or furnished to the public, excepting as hereafter provided, must close promptly at 6 p.m. And at all times prevent people from congregating to talk or visit. All ice cream parlors and soft drink places must close at 6. At no time permit large numbers of people to congregate. This order shall be and remain in full force and effect from this date. W.C. Morgan, Van. Death was invaded another home in the community, and Miss Minerva, daughter of Mr. and Mrs. Thad Schlegel, residing east of the city, is dead. Her death being due to influenza pneumonia. Miss Schlegel was a young lady of refinement and accomplishment, had for 6 years taught school in this vicinity, where she popularized herself with her ability. She was born August 25th, 1892, and had always made her home with her parents. She leaves behind her parents, 3 brothers and 4 sisters. And so Minerva is shown on the left, and then also in the right photo, she's with her family, and she's the one that's standing on the right. So there was a brown bag lunch, I'm trying to think which one that was now, but that's what I found out about. The Heidi one. So the left photo shows Nettie, Mabel, Heidi, and Blanche, and in the middle is Eddie and Blanche Stoll, and the right is Blanche, Heidi, Stoll. So the obituary, Blanche Heidi Stoll dead. The sad news was received here Thursday of the death of Mrs. Ed Stoll, who passed away after a brief illness of influenza at her home near Lamoni. Mrs. Stoll will always be remembered as Blanche Heidi and was well known in this vicinity as she always lived in Fulton until the time of her marriage about a year ago. She was the youngest daughter of Mr. and Mrs. John Heidi and was beloved by a large circle of friends. Mrs. Heidi and daughter left for the bedside of daughter and sister but did not arrive before she passed away. A letter message to the family here states that the mother-in-law, Mrs. Stoll, died Sunday of the same malady. Her husband Ed survived the flu and lived until 1969. He married Allie Kathleen DeLong, and they were the parents of 2 children. Edward William Stoll lost his mother, Mary Frances, on December 8th. Mary was the mother of 6 children, the youngest just 8 years old when her mother died. Edward's wife had died the same year on December 5th, 3 days before the death of his mother, as mentioned in the last slide. So he was the one that was married to the Heidi girl. Death follows several days' illness, Harry John Hearst, youngest of the late Honorable and Mrs. Alfred A. Hearst, was born in Hurstville in 1890 and passed away at his home there from pneumonia. He attended the high school in our city and since that time has been associated with the Hearst Lime Company, and he was the bookkeeper and assistant manager there. On June 30th, 1915, he was united in marriage to Miss Lucille Emma Robinson, and to this union 2 children, Marion 2.5 and Harry K. about 1, who with the bereaved young wife and mother mourn his untimely loss. On left, photo of Lucille and Henry on their wedding day, and Henry shown in the automobile on the right. On July 29, 1919, William Hubby, Fairfield Township, returned home from overseas about June 10 and has not been well since. He saw some very hard service during the war and was gassed and had not fully recovered from it when he was stricken with the flu. So I haven't been able to really find out. I found some William Hubbies, but the ages just weren't correct, so I don't know if he survived or not. Jackson Sentinel, September 9th. When you stop and realize that the corn's out of the way of the frost and everybody's working and wants to work, most everybody's cellar is pretty well furnished with vegetables and goodies, and we've got the assurance from scientists that the flu won't be bothering around much next winter. Ain't it grand and glorious feeling? Jackson Sentinel, September 12, 1919. Peruna, worth its weight in gold. It is fine after an attack of grippe or Spanish flu. I meant to look up grippe. I don't know what that is. Do you know? Is it grippe?
It's just a
Grippe?
bad disease.
It's a disease.
It's just the crud.
Flu advice in 1919. Without much question, we shall have some return of the epidemic of influenza this winter. There is little likelihood of any such sweeping attack as made last year a horror in the memory. But there will be cases enough to make a scare. If the people wish to be scared, don't be. Chiropractic talks. Chiropractic adjustments are unquestionably the best armor by which you can protect yourself against the flu. Preston Times, December 18, 1920. Dr. C.H. Armstrong of Preston treated 1,200 cases of influenza without a death occurring. And again, this is after the major pandemic. And among them being 17 cases of pneumonia. He states the manner in which he treated the flu, and is no doubt information of great value to many who worked hard and exhausted their powers of knowledge with poor success. The article in the Clinical Medicine is accompanied by a splendid illustration of the doctor who is about to step into his Dodge coupe for a professional trip in the country. A woman who lived through the epidemic as a child told Iowa State University that children came up with the macabre playground rhyme. I had a little bird, its name was Enza. I opened the window and influenza. Look, the last slide is right. I made it. It's just now almost 1 o'clock. Anyone have any questions or want to share anything?
It sounds like a lot of the people died ultimately from pneumonia.
Correct.
But you said at one point, it might have been with the Army soldiers, they woke up healthy in the morning, contracted it, and even was dead by supper. Do you know how it affected the body to cause death that quickly?
It did something to the lungs. I mean, obviously the pneumonia, but something probably to where it just made breathing impossible is what I'm thinking. But it didn't, other than that one little chunk of information, it didn't really explain.
So that's kind of what COVID did also, as far as pneumonia, and a lot of people who had COVID died of pneumonia.
And what I read too, I don't think I mentioned it, they talked about wearing the mask, but then at the same time, they talked about how they knew that those did nothing. The masks did nothing. And so, you have to wonder why then they put us through all that.
I remember, and I wish I had more information on this because I have lots of questions, but I remember being told that my paternal grandmother, who was born in 1900, when she was just 19, went and stayed with a family who was all down with the Spanish flu because they needed somebody to take care of things.
Did she die?
No, she didn't. Or I wouldn't be here.
Oh, okay, I guess you read it didn't happen.
Yeah, no, she survived, but I wish I knew, was it a neighbor, was it relatives? And, you know, what, did they live or did they all die? I don't know.
And it's kind of surprising because, you know, how I mentioned some of them in the family, it's like, okay, the mom died, but, you know, all these kids, and they didn't die. And
Another little note about Dr. Armstrong, I've seen his grave over at the Preston Cemetery. And my mother told me that when he died, he didn't really have anything. He must have not charged a lot of times for his help and so on. And the community, or people in the community, gathered together to buy him a headstone. So he must have been a good man.
yeah, yeah. Yes.
So I arrived late, so did you talk about anyone at Baldwin that died? I don't really know, except that my mom was born in December of 1918, and my grandfather took her from their place into Baldwin to be nursed by another lady because my mom's mom was so sick with the flu. But she survived.
There was a Bach.
I mentioned, yeah, that Miss Bach, or Jepson.
I caught the Bach.
Okay. Yeah, and I don't think there were any others. And I guess the reason why I have so many Bellevue names is I was able to get those from the library upstairs. You know, not that their death records were on Ancestry, but otherwise it was just really hard to tell. But we have a lot of people buried in our Jackson County cemeteries that died in 1918. But I don't know what the other people died from. But this was all I could come up with.
Did you ever state what the mortality rate was overall for the number of people that contracted it?
At the beginning, and you talked about worldwide or just in Iowa?
Oh, let's say Iowa.
In Iowa. And I think that was back a few slides. Yeah, some of those numbers I don't remember. Oops, is that it? Okay, so that's talking about the military, that at the military camps that infected 93,000 and killed 6,000.
I caught that. That's about 6%, I thought.
Yeah. Not sure. And you know, you can look, and there's so many conflicting stats on this that just vary a lot.
That's fine.
I know I put it on the radio because it was in your notes to me.
It was in my notes.
But
Oh,
can't
okay.
find it.
You can't find it?
Well,
Okay.
I shut my phone off. So
Sure.
While she's looking, my dad left Iowa and went to North Dakota to join the Army in World War I with his brother. And they shipped out to New Jersey. And when he got there, my uncle got sick. I heard measles, but it might have been the flu, who knows? And he survived. He never went overseas, and then my dad went on over to France and stuff, so.
And I think, you know, that's definitely how it spread with the soldiers, but where it originated, there's just a lot of different theories there. Yeah. And then some of the stuff that they're writing about now, you know, they're saying that, oh no, it didn't kill the healthy. All of those people, you know, had underlying conditions, and I don't know. As I look at all of these young men, I just have a hard time believing that, you know, they went through military training and so on.
So what you had said to me was, the Spanish flu spread swiftly around the world within a little over a year, and it had infected up to 500 million individuals. The high mortality in healthy people, 20 to 40 years, which you said. Then it said it hit Iowa in late September 1918, and over 93,000 Americans got it, killing more than 6,000.
Okay.
But I guess you didn't give me an Iowa.
An Iowa.
Oh, that is Iowa.
That is Iowa.
It hit Iowa in late September, infecting over 93,000, killing more than 6,000.
And
Iowa.
that's like 6 to 7% then.
Yeah.
Quite a few did survive.
Yeah.
So I mean, it just, you just think about the impact that it made on our county with the young people then that died and some that, hadn't started families yet, and it's pretty tragic. Okay, thank you very much.